Chapter 4. I Meet a Messiah. "I am pleased to meet you," is the somewhat conventional greeting with which I am received by Meher Baba. He is destined, had I but known it, to flash like a meteorite across the western sky and arouse the curiosity of millions of people in Europe and America. Moreover, like a meteorite, he will fall ingloriously to earth. I am the first Western journalist to interview him, for I track him down to his Indian abode when he is almost unknown to more than local fame. I become acquainted with one of his chief disciples, and after some correspondence, wonder what manner of man has joined the ranks of self-appointed deliverers of mankind. 2 Parsi disciples come to Bombay to escort me. Before we leave the city, they inform me that it is necessary to make a present of choice flowers and fruits to their master. So we proceed to the bazaar and they collect a large hamper of these commodities on my behalf. Our train arrives at Ahmednagar next morning, after traveling through the night. I remember it as the historical place where the cruel emperor Aurangzeb, preserver of the faith and ornament of the Mughal throne, stroked his heavy beard for the last time, for death caught him here in his tent. A rackety old wartime Ford car, which does duty for the transport needs of Meher Baba's retreat, waits for us at the station. The 7-mile run which follows takes us through flat country. An avenue of neem trees lines part of the road. We pass a village whose huddled brown roofs rise against the elaborate little spire of the local temple. Then I sight a stream, whose banks are lined with pink and yellow flowers, and in whose muddy waters buffaloes are blissfully resting. We arrive at Meher Baba's curious colony, which is spread out in scattered erections. 3 odd-looking stone structures, which I learn later are the remnants of a dismantled army campsite, stand in a field. 3 plain wooden bungalows stand in an adjacent one. A quarter of a mile away is a little village whose name is given as Arunachala. The whole place presents a bare appearance and seems half deserted. My Parsi escorts are at pains to inform me that this is only the country headquarters of their master, and that his principal center is near the town of Nasik, where the majority of his intimate disciples reside and where visitors are usually received. A few men emerge from one of the bungalows as we pass. They lounge on the veranda, smile, gesticulate, and seem pleased at the arrival of a European in their midst. We cross a field and reach a queer-looking structure which is nothing less than an artificial cave. It is built of stones and rubble cemented together and is about 8 feet deep. It faces due south and receives the bright morning sunlight full in its interior. I look around and see the rolling expanse of fields, the ring of hills which bounds the horizon on the east, and the tree-shaded village down in a hollow. This Parsi holy man is doubtless a great lover of nature, for he has set his retreat in a scene of aloof, untroubled peace. I am indeed glad to find such a quiet backwater after the whirl of Bombay life. 2 men stand on guard like sentries outside the cave's entrance. They move at our approach and go inside to consult their master. "Put out your cigarette," whispers one of my escorts. "Baba does not like smoking." I throw the offending cigarette away. A minute later, I am conducted into the august presence of the so-called new Messiah. He squats at the far end of the cave, the entire floor of which is covered with a beautifully patterned Persian rug. He proves to be somewhat different from the person I have imagined. His eyes do not penetrate me, his facial expression lacks strength, and although I am aware something ascetic, unworldly, and gentle in his atmosphere, I wonder why I feel no responsive thrill, such as one may reasonably expect to feel in the presence of one who proposes to win the allegiance of millions of people. He is clothed in a long, spotless white robe, which looks ludicrously like an old-fashioned English nightshirt. His amiable and kindly face is framed in chestnut-colored hair, which falls in long curly waves to his neck. I am struck by the soft, silky texture of the hair, which is remarkably like the hair of a woman. His nose rises into arched prominence and then descends into aquiline depth. The eyes are dark, medium-sized and clear, but I find them unimpressive. A heavy brown mustache stretches across his upper lip. The light-tinted olive skin betrays his Persian origin, for his father hails from the land of the Shahs. Withal, he is young, apparently somewhere in the 30s. A final feature which remains in memory is his forehead. It is so low as to appear less than average height, and it is so receding as to make me wonder. Do brain areas carry qualitative significance? Does a man's forehead indicate his powers of thought? But possibly a Messiah is above such physical limitations. "I am pleased to see you," he remarks, but not, mind you, in the usual manner of human speech, for he holds a small alphabet board upon his lap and points rapidly with his index finger to one letter after another, as the words are spelled out in this dumb pantomime manner. His secretary interprets them aloud for my benefit. Since the 10th of July, 1925, the holy man has not uttered a single word. His younger brother tells me that when the new Messiah breaks into speech, his message will startle the world. Meanwhile, he adopts a pose of strict silence. Still fingering the board, Meher Baba makes some kindly inquiries into my personal well-being, asks questions about my life, and expresses his gratification at my interest in India. He possesses an excellent knowledge of English, so there is no necessity to translate my speech. He postpones till the late afternoon the lengthy interview which I request. "Food and rest are your immediate needs," he says, or rather communicates. I adjourn to one of the stone structures. It possesses a bare, gloomy interior, but contains an old bedstead, without bedding, a ramshackle table, and a chair which might have rendered good service during the Indian Mutiny. Here I am to make my home for nearly a week. I peer through the glassless window and am rewarded by a view of sparse, untilled fields stretching away into scrub bush dotted with cactus. 4 hours creep lethargically around my watch. Once again I sit upon the Persian rug, face to face with Meher Baba, whose colossal claim that he is destined to give spiritual light and practical leading to the whole of mankind I have yet to investigate. He puts his claim in the first sentence, which he flicks out on the alphabet board. "I shall change the history of the whole world, I." My note-taking disturbs him, however. "Can you not make your notes after you leave me?" I agree, and henceforth inscribe his words upon the pages of memory. As Jesus came to impart spirituality to a materialistic age, so I have come to impart a spiritual push to present-day mankind. There is always a fixed time for such divine workings, and when the hour is ripe I shall reveal my true nature to the entire world. The great teachers of religion, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, and Zoroaster, do not differ in their essential doctrines. All these prophets came from God. The chief commandments run through all their teachings like a golden thread. These divine ones came out into public when their help was most needed, when spirituality was at its lowest ebb and materialism was apparently everywhere victorious. Such a time we are fast approaching at present. The whole world is now enmeshed in sensual desires, in racial selfishness and money worship. God is forsaken. True religion is abused. Man seeks life, and the priests usually give him a stone. God, therefore, must send his true prophet among men once again to establish true worship and to awaken people out of their materialistic stupor. I but follow in the line of these earlier prophets. This is my mission. God has given me a mandate. I listen quietly while the secretary voices these amazing assertions. I keep my mind open, uncritical, and offer no mental resistance. This is not to say that I accept them, however, but that I am aware one must know how to listen among these Orientals. Otherwise a Westerner will get little for his pains, even where there might be something worthy of acceptance. Truth can stand a ruthless investigation, but the methods of the Occident must be modified to suit the mental atmosphere of the Orient. Meher Baba smiles genially at me and then proceeds. The prophets laid down certain rules and regulations to help the masses lead better lives and to incline them towards God. Gradually, these rules become the tenets of an organized religion. But the idealistic spirit and motive force which prevailed during the founder's lifetime disappear gradually after his death. That is why organizations cannot bring spiritual truth nearer, and why true religion is always a personal concern. Religious organizations become like archaeological departments trying to resuscitate the past. Therefore, I shall not attempt to establish any new religion, cult, or organization, but I shall rejuvenate the religious thought of all peoples, instill a higher understanding of life into them. Dogmas invented centuries after the founder's death frequently differ startlingly, but the fundamentals of all religions are really the same, because all issue from the same source, God. Therefore, when I appear publicly, I shall run down no existing religion, but then I shall not uphold any special one. I want to turn men's minds away from sectarian differences, so that they will agree on essential truths. Remember, though, that every prophet considers the times, the circumstances, and the prevailing mentality of the people before his public manifestation. He therefore preaches doctrines best understood and the best suited to such conditions. Meher Baba pauses for a while to let these exalted ideas soak into my head, and then his words take a new turn. Have you not noticed how all the nations have been brought into quick communication with each other during this modern epoch? Do you not see how railways, steamships, telephones, cables, wireless, and newspapers have caused the whole world to become a closely woven unit? An important event which happens in one country is made known within a day to the people of a country 10,000 miles away. Therefore, a man who wishes to deliver an important message can find almost the whole of mankind as a ready audience. For all that, there is a sound reason. The time is soon coming to give mankind a universal spiritual belief which shall serve all races of people and all countries. In other words, the way is being prepared to enable me to deliver a worldwide message. This breathtaking announcement indicates sufficiently that Meher Baba possesses an unlimited faith in his own future, and indeed his whole manner confirms it. In his own estimation, his stock will one day stand at infinitely more than par. But when shall you tell the world about your mission? I ask. I shall break my silence and deliver my message only when there is chaos and confusion everywhere, for then I shall be most needed. When the world is rocking in upheavals, earthquakes, floods, and volcanic eruptions. When both East and West are aflame with war. Truly the whole world must suffer, for the whole world must be redeemed. Do you know the date of this war? Yes, it is not far off, but I do not wish to reveal the date. That is a terrible prophecy, I exclaim. Meher Baba spreads out his thin, tapering fingers apologetically. It is. The war will be terrible in its nature because scientific ingenuity will make it more intense than the last war. However, it will last only a short time, a few months, and at its worst I shall make myself publicly known and declare my mission to the entire world. By my material efforts and spiritual powers, I shall speedily bring the conflict to an abrupt end, thus restoring peace to all the nations. Yet great natural changes must take place on this planet simultaneously. Life and property in different parts of the globe will suffer. If I play the role of a Messiah, it will be because world conditions require it. Be assured that I shall not leave my spiritual work undone. His secretary, a short, dusky-faced man who wears the round black cap of the Maratha people, looks at me impressively after he finishes speaking the last word. The expression on his face seems to say, "There, how do you like that? You see what important things we know here?" His master's fingers begin to move over the board once more, and he hastens to tell me their new import. After the war will come a long era of unique peace, a time of world tranquility. Disarmament will then no longer be a matter of mere talk but an actual fact. Racial and communal strife will cease. Sectarian hatred between religious organizations will come to an end. I shall travel widely throughout the world, and the nations will be eager to see me. My spiritual message will reach every land, every town, every village even. Universal brotherhood, peace among men, sympathy for the poor and downtrodden, love of God. I shall promote these things. What of India, your own country? In India I shall not rest till the pernicious caste system is uprooted and destroyed. India became depressed in the scale of nations with the establishment of caste. When the outcast and lower castes are elevated, India will find herself to be one of the influential countries of the world. And what of her future? Despite its faults, India is still the most spiritual country in the world. The future will find it the moral leader of all the nations. All the great founders of religions were born in the East, and it is to the East that the peoples must continue to look for spiritual light. I try to visualize the great Western nations sitting at the feet of the meek little brown men, but fail. Perhaps the white-robed figure squatting in front of me grasps my difficulty, for he adds, "The so-called subjection of India is not real subjection. It is of the body, and therefore temporary. The soul of the country is deathless and great, even if outwardly the nation has lost its power." This subtle explanation somewhat eludes my understanding. I return to our earlier theme. We in the West have heard most of the things in your message from other sources. You have nothing new to tell us, then. My words can only echo the old spiritual truths, but it is my mystic power that will bring a new element into the world's life. Upon this point I seek to rest my brain. For a while there is silence. I ask no more questions. I turn my head and gaze out of the cave. Far across the quiet fields, a line of hills rises in the distance. In the sky, a pitiless sun scorches man, beast, and earth alike. The minutes pass. In this secluded cave, in this unending heat, surrounded by absorbent minds, it is easy to weave grandiose schemes of world reformation, to possess oneself of extravagant religious ideas. But out in the world of reality, amid the hard life of materialistic cities, these things would soon dissipate like mist before the dawning sun. Europe is hard, skeptical, I remarked, turning and looking at the new Messiah. How are you going to convince us that you speak with real divine authority? How can you convert unfamiliar peoples to your brand of spiritual belief? The average Westerner will tell you that it is impossible, and very likely he will laugh at you for your pains. You do not realize how changed the times will be. Meher Baba strokes his pale, slender hands, and then he adds some astounding claims which sound fantastic to Western ears, yet his manner is quite matter-of-fact. Once I publicly announce myself as a Messiah, nothing will be able to withstand my power. I shall openly work miracles in proof of my mission at the same time, restoring sight to the blind, healing the sick, maimed and crippled, yes, even raising the dead. These things will be child's play to me. I shall work these miracles because through them people will everywhere be forced to believe in me, and then believe in my message. These wonders will not be done to satisfy idle curiosity, but to convince the skeptically minded. I hold my breath. The interview has reached the boundary of common sense. My mind begins to falter. We are entering the region of Oriental fantasy. Make no mistake, however, continues the Parsi Messiah. I tell my disciples that these miracles are to be done only for the masses, not for them. I should not care to perform a single wonder, but I know that this will turn the minds of common people to my words. If I shall astonish the peoples of the world with these feats, it will be only because I wish to spiritualize them. Baba has already done marvelous things, breaks in the secretary. I am instantly alert. Such as? I demand quickly. The master smiles, self-deprecatingly. Tell him another time, Vishnu, he communicates. I can perform any miracle when necessary. It is easy to one who has reached my divine state. I make a mental note to buttonhole the secretary on the morrow and get some details of these reputed marvels. They will form an interesting part of my investigation. I come as a circumspect inquirer, and every kind of fact will make grist for my mill. There is another interlude of silence. I request the holy man to give me certain information about his career. Tell him that also, Vishnu, he answers, directing me again to his secretary. You will have plenty of opportunity to talk to my disciples, since you are staying here for a little while. They can tell you about the past. The talk drifts into the domain of general matters. Soon after, our meeting disperses. The first thing I do on getting back to my quarters is to light a cigarette, thus atoning for the one forbidden me, and then watch its fragrant smoke rise erratically upward. I witness a curious spectacle in the early evening. The stars have just begun to twinkle faintly. The day is not quite dead, and in this queer half-light, a few oil lanterns glow palely. Meher sits inside his cave while a motley crowd composed of his disciples, visitors, and people from the nearby village of Rangaon gather in horseshoe fashion around the entrance. A ceremony which is repeated every evening wherever Meher may be at the time is about to take place. A devotee holds aloft a shallow metal bowl which serves as a lamp, its wick being dipped in oil which is strongly perfumed with sandalwood. He waves it 7 times around the saintly head of his master. The assembled audience thereupon break into a vigorous chorus of chants and prayers. Through the intonations of their Marathi dialect, I catch the name of Baba several times. It is obvious that the chants are hyperboles of adulation for their master. Everyone looks at him with adoring eyes. Meher's younger brother sits at a small portable harmonium and makes a wailing kind of music to accompany the singers. During the course of the ceremony, each devotee files up to the cave in turn, prostrates himself before Meher, and kisses his uncovered feet. Some are so overwrought with pious emotion that they prolong the act of osculation to a full minute. I am told that this act is deemed extremely beneficial spiritually, since it brings Meher's blessing upon the devotee and automatically washes away some of his sins. I walk back to my quarters, wondering what the next day will bring forth. Somewhere across the fields and out in the jungle, a jackal bays and breaks the night's silence. The next day I gather the secretary and some of the English-speaking disciples outside of one of their wooden bungalows. We sit in half a circle. Those who do not understand English stand a little distance away and watch us with smiling faces and interested eyes. I proceed to extract from all these collective minds and memories such facts about their amazing master's career as I do not already know. His personal name is Meher, but he calls himself Sadguru Meher Baba. Sadguru means perfect master, while Baba is simply a form of affection in common use among some of the Indian peoples, and it is by this name alone that his disciples usually address him. Meher Baba's father is a Persian who is an adherent of Zoroastrian creed and who emigrated to India as a poor youth. Meher was his first son and was born in 1894 at Pune City. The boy was put to school at 5, proved good at his studies, and passed the matriculation examination at 17. He then entered Deccan College in Pune and received a good modern education for 2 years. Now began the tortuous and incomprehensible phase of his career. He was cycling back from school one evening and was about to pass the dwelling place of a well-known Mohammedan woman, fakir. Her name was Hazrat Babajan, and she was reputed to be over a century old. She was reclining on a long couch which stood upon a railed veranda outside her humble wooden one-roomed house. When the cycle drew abreast of her, the old woman rose and beckoned to the boy. He dismounted and approached her. She clasped his hands and embraced him and then kissed his forehead. What happened afterwards is not very clear. I gathered that the youth reached his home in a dazed mental state and that during the following 8 months his mental faculties progressively weakened until he became unable to study properly. In the end, he had to bid a final farewell to his college because he could no longer follow his lessons. Thereafter, young Meher fell into a semi-idiotic condition and was hardly able to look after himself. His eyes became dull and lifeless, and he lacked the intelligence to perform the most elementary duties of a human being, such as taking food, washing oneself, attending to the calls of nature, and so on. When his father said, "Eat," he took his food in a mechanical manner. Otherwise, he did not understand why the food was put before him. In short, he became a human automaton. The young man at 20, whose parents have to care for him like a child of 3, seems a case of mental regression, and the distracted father concluded that he had overworked his mind while cramming for an examination. Meher was taken to various doctors, who diagnosed mental breakdown and gave him injections. In 9 months' time, improvement in his lamentable condition set in and gradually increased, until he was able to understand his environment intelligently and to act more normally. After his recovery, it was discovered that his character had changed. His scholastic ambitions were gone. His ambitions for a worldly career had disappeared, while his interest in games and sports had collapsed. All these things were replaced by a deep thirst for the religious life and by a continuous aspiration to spiritualize himself. Because he believed that these changes took their root in the kiss which the Mohammedan woman fakir had bestowed on him, Meher approached the old lady for advice about his future. She directed him to find a spiritual teacher. He inquired where this boon was to be obtained. She waved her hand vaguely into space for reply. He visited several holy men of repute in the locality. Then he went farther afield to the villages within 100 miles of his native Pune. One day he walked into a little stone-built temple near Sakori. It was a poor, humble shrine, but it was the abode of a very holy man, or so the villagers said. And so when Meher came face to face with Upasani Maharaj, he felt that he had found his master. The young aspirant for holiness made periodic excursions from home to Sakori. He usually spent a few days at a time with his teacher, but once he remained for 4 months. Meher asserts that during this period he was being perfected, made ready for his mission. One evening he collected 30 of his old schoolmates and boyhood friends, gave them mysterious hints of an important meeting, and brought them to the little temple at Sakori. The doors were locked and Upasani Maharaj, the stern-looking holy man who lived there, rose and addressed the gathering. He spoke to them about religion, told them to seek virtue, informed them that he had made Meher the spiritual inheritor of his own mystic powers and knowledge, and finally announced to the surprised young men that Meher had attained divine perfection. He strongly advised them to become followers of their Parsi friend, for then they would receive great spiritual benefit both in this life and in that to come. Some of his listeners took his advice and others remained skeptical. About a year later, when Meher had reached the age of 27, the young Parsi announced to his small flock that he had become conscious of a divine mission which he was to carry out, and that God had given him a work of colossal importance to mankind. He did not straightaway reveal the precise nature of that mission, but within a few years he let the secret emerge. He was destined to become a Messiah. In 1924, Meher left India for the first time. He embarked on a journey to Persia with a company of 6 disciples, telling them that he would tour the country of his ancestors. When the ship touched port at Bushire, he suddenly changed his mind and left the place by the next homeward boat. 3 months later, rebel forces captured Tehran, the Persian capital, and deposed the old regime. A new Shah came to the throne. Meher Baba then turned to his followers and said, "Now you see the result of my mystic workings during my visit to Persia." His disciples told me that Persia was a happier land under the new ruler, and that the Mohammedans and Zoroastrians, Jews and Christians were living amicably together. whereas there had been constant strife and cruel outrages among them under the old regime. Some years after this mysterious excursion, Meher Baba began a curious educational institution. At his suggestion, a disciple purchased the colony's present site near the village of Rangaon. Several rough bungalows were constructed, together with many thatch and pole huts. A free boarding school was then declared open, the teachers being recruited from the Parsi's educated disciples and the pupils from the families of devotees or their friends. No fees were charged for tuition, while even board and lodging were free. In addition to the usual secular subjects, there was special instruction in non-denominational religion by Meher himself. On such attractive terms, it was an easy matter to collect nearly 100 boys. A dozen of them arrived from distant Persia. The boys were taught the moral ideals which are more or less common to most religions, and the life stories of the great prophets were unfolded to them. The class on religion gradually became the central feature of the curriculum, and Meher Baba led the older boys in a devotional mysticism which appears to have been of a somewhat watery nature. They were taught to regard him as a sacred personage, even to worship him. A few boys began to manifest signs of religious hysteria in the sequence. Strange scenes occurred among them every few days. A noticeable feature of this unusual school was that the pupils belonged to varying castes, races, and creeds. Hindus, Mohammedans, Indian Christians, and Zoroastrians mingled freely. But Meher Baba wanted a still wider enrollment. He sent his chief disciple on a mission to England to find a few white pupils. The emissary, however, encountered much difficulty because the white parents were unwilling to entrust their children to a stranger who wanted to haul the latter off to a school in distant Asia. Moreover, the idea of a school combining all religions did not mean much to them. There are plenty of schools in England where pupils of different creeds foregather in a natural, spontaneous manner without the fuss that is made of it in a creed-ridden country like India. One day the emissary from India met an Englishman who straightway became converted to the acceptance of the Parsi Messiah after a conversation or two. The man was possessed of an enthusiastic temperament, and having rapidly traveled to all the cults which honeycomb London, he was ready for what seemed to be the loftier message of Meher Baba. So he assisted in the quest for white pupils and found 3 children whose poverty-stricken parents were willing to ease their own burdens at the price of parting with them. At this stage, the Indian office bestirred itself into activity, investigated the matter, shook its official head, and put a ban on the project. The children did not sail. The representative of the Parsi Messiah returned to India, accompanied by the Englishman and the latter's wife and sister-in-law. 5 or 6 months after their arrival, Meher Baba sent them back to England at the expense of his chief disciple. I learnt from Meher that his object in founding this school was twofold. First, he wanted to break down the racial and religious barriers among the pupils. Secondly, he sought to train a selected number of them as future ambassadors for a spiritual cause. When the years had sufficiently ripened them, and the time came for public announcement of his own mission, he would send them out to all the 5 continents to act as apostles and helpers in his destined work of spiritualizing mankind. Another activity developed into being alongside the school. A primitive hospital was opened, and ardent disciples were sent out to collect the blind, the ailing, and the crippled from the locality. The latter were given free medical treatment, food, and accommodation, while a Parsi holy man provided them with spiritual consolation. 5 lepers were cured by his mere touch, says an enthusiastic devotee. Alas, I am a trifle skeptical, for no one knows who they are, where they are, or how to find them now. 'Tis a piece of Oriental exaggeration, I fear. Surely one of the lepers would have attached himself to Meher Baba's train of disciples in sheer gratitude. Surely the news would have spread like a prairie fire across the leprosy-ridden India, and all the stricken souls of the country would have eagerly flocked to the hospital near Rangaon. There grew up a large camp following of devotees, visitors and hanger-ons from nearby villages. The population of this unusual colony reached into hundreds. Intense religious fervor pervaded the whole place, and Meher Baba was, of course, the center of the whole picture. 18 months after the colony was founded, it was suddenly closed down and all these activities were abandoned. The boys were sent back to their parents and the patients to their homes. Meher Baba vouchsafed no reason for this move on his part. I learned that sudden, inexplicable impulses of this kind were a regular feature of his conduct. In the spring of 1929, he sent out his first missionary disciple, a man named Sadhu Leek, who was bidden to go on tour around India. The latter was told as a parting injunction, "You have the advantage of a Messiah to work for. Be cosmopolitan and do not run down any religion. Be sure that I will know all about you. Do not be disheartened by the remarks of others. I will lead you and follow none but me." From the information which I picked up, it was obvious that the poor fellow was physically unfitted for a wandering life. He was able to create a small following in Madras, but soon sickened on the way, and then returned to die. Such is a rapid outline of the Parsi holy man's career. I have had several fugitive talks of a chatty nature with Meher Baba, but I want to hear something more definite about his self-appointed mission to the world. So I seek and obtain my final interview with him. He wears a soft blue scarf today, and the alphabet board rests upon his knees in readiness for our conversation. The disciples present form an admiring audience and provide the requisite background. Everyone smiles at everyone else until I shoot a sudden question through the silence. "How do you know you are a Messiah?" The disciples look aghast at my temerity. The master moves his bushy eyebrows, but he is not disconcerted, for he smiles at the inquiring Westerner and quickly answers. I know it so well. You know that you are a human being, and so I know that I am a Messiah. It is my whole life. My bliss never stops. You never mistake yourself for some other person, so I cannot mistake who I am. I have a divine work to do, and I will do it. What really happened when the Mohammedan woman, fakir, kissed you? Can you remember? Yes, until then I was as worldly as other youths. Hazrat Babajan unlocked the door for me. Her kiss was the turning point. I felt as though the universe was receding into space, and I was left entirely alone. Yes, I was alone, with God. For months I could not sleep, and yet I grew no weaker but remained as strong as before. My father did not understand. He thought I was going mad. He called in one doctor and then another. They gave me medicines and tried injections, but they were all wrong. I was with God, and there was nothing to cure. Only I had lost hold of normal existence, and it took me a long time to get back. Do you understand? Quite. Now that you have got back, when will you let the public know? My manifestation will happen in the near future, but I cannot give you the exact date. And then, my task on this earth will last for 33 years. Afterwards I shall undergo a tragic death. My own people, the Parsis, will be responsible for my violent end, but others will continue my work. Your disciples, I presume? My circle of 12 selected disciples, of whom one will become a master at the appointed time. It is for their sake that I fast often and observe silence, for this wipes their sins away and will enable them to become perfect spiritually. They have all been with me in past births, and I am bound to help them. There will also be an outer circle with 44 members. They will be men and women of lower spiritual grade. Their duty will be to assist the 12 chief disciples after the latter have attained perfection. There are other claimants to messiahship. Meher laughs in deprecation of those absurd persons. Yes, there is Krishnamurti. Mrs. Besant's protege, the Theosophists, deceived themselves. Their chief wire pullers are supposed to be somewhere on the Himalayas in Tibet. You will find nothing but dust and stones in their supposed abodes. Besides, no real spiritual teacher ever required someone else's body to be prepared and trained for his use. That is ridiculous. Other strange statements emerge from this final conversation, a curious jumble of assertions which come through slim fingers flickering from letter to letter. America has a great future. She will become a spiritually minded nation. I am aware of everyone who puts his faith in me, and he is always helped. Do not try to read my actions. You will never fathom them. Once I visit a place and stay there, however short a time, its spiritual atmosphere becomes greatly elevated. The general spiritual push that I shall give the world will soon put right all material problems, economic, political, sexual, sociological, for selfishness will be destroyed and brotherhood will replace it. Shivaji, the chieftain who built up the Maratha Empire in the 17th century, is also here. He points to himself. The meaning is that Meher is a reincarnation of Shivaji. Some of the planets are inhabited. They resemble this globe in culture and material advancement, but spiritually our Earth is most advanced. One observes that Meher suffers from no modesty when discussing his claims. I'm a little startled, however, when he communicates a command to me at the finish of the interview. Go to the West as my representative. Spread my name as that of the coming divine messenger. Work for me in my influence, and you will then be working for the good of mankind. The world will probably scout me as a madman. I reply uneasily, for such a task staggers my imagination. Meher disagrees. I answer that nothing short of working a series of miracles will convince the West that anyone is a spiritual Superman, let alone a Messiah, and that since I cannot perform miracles, I cannot undertake the job of being his herald. Then you shall perform them, is his comforting assurance. I remain silent. Meher misconstrues my silence. Stay with me, and I shall confer great powers on you. He urges, you are very fortunate. I will help you to obtain advanced powers, so that you will render service in the West. It is unnecessary to describe the remainder of this incredible interview. Some men are born great, some achieve greatness, and others appoint a press agent. Meher seems to favor the latter course. Next day I prepare to leave. I have imbibed sufficient pious wisdom and prophetic forebodings to suffice me for the time. I have not wandered to distant parts of the world merely to hear religious assertions or declarations of grandeur. I want facts, even if they are to be facts of a strange, uncommon kind. And I want reliable evidence. Better still, something personal, something to which I can testify for my own satisfaction. My kit is packed. I am about to leave. I go to Meher and bid him a polite farewell. He informs me that within a few months he will be in residence at his central headquarters, which are situated near the town of Nasik. He suggests that I should visit him there and stay for a month. Do this. Come when you can. I will give you wonderful spiritual experiences and enable you to know the real truth about me. You will be shown my inner spiritual powers. After that, you will have no more doubts. You will be able to prove by your own personal experience what I claim. Then you can go to the West and win many people for me. I decide to return at my leisure and spend a month with him. Despite the theatrical character of the Parsi holy man and the fantastic nature of his mission, I decide to investigate the whole thing with an open mind. A brief return to the stir of city life in Bombay, and then I entrain for Pune. My wanderings around this ancient land are about to begin. The old Mohammedan holy woman, whose sudden intervention started Meher Baba off on his queer tangent, engages my interest. I deem a short visit to her will not come amiss. I have already made a few preliminary inquiries about her in Bombay, where I learned from former Judge Kandalawala, who has known her for 50 years, that her age is really about 95. I remember that Meher's followers informed me that it was 130, but I generously ascribe this exaggeration to the heat of their enthusiasm. The judge briefly tells me her story. She is a native of Baluchistan, that vague territory situated between Afghanistan and India, and she ran away from home quite early. After long and adventurous wanderings afoot, she arrived at Pune about the beginning of this century and has never moved from the city since. At first she made her home under a neem tree where she insisted on remaining in all seasons. Her reputation for sanctity and strange powers spread throughout the Mohammedan people in the vicinity until even the Hindus came to treat her with due reverence. Some Mohammedans eventually built a wooden shelter under the tree for her, since she refused to live in a proper house. This gives her the semblance of a home and provides some protection against the inclemencies of the monsoon season. I asked the judge for his personal opinion. He replies that he does not doubt but that the Hazrat Babajan is a genuine fakir. The judge happens to be a Parsi, so I make some judicious inquiries about Meher Baba, who is well known to him. What I learn is unlikely to make me more favorable to the Parsi Messiah. I ask him finally about Upasani Maharaj, who is now the inspirer of Meher. My informant, a shrewd, discerning old man of vast experience in these and worldly matters, enters into a lengthy account of his own unfortunate contact with him. I give 2 instances. Upasani had made ghastly mistakes. He once induced me to go to Benares, where he was staying at the time. After a while, I got a premonition of death and wanted to return to Pune, where my family was living. Upasani prevented me from going by repeatedly prophesying that everything would be all right. Nevertheless, 2 days later, I received a telegram saying that my son's wife had given birth to a child and that it died within a few minutes. In the other case, Upasani told my son-in-law, who was thinking of going on the Bombay Stock Exchange, that such a move would prove extremely fortunate for him. Acting on this advice, he embarked on the exchange and was almost ruined. Judge Kandalawala impresses me with the independence of his outlook. He debunks Upasani Maharaj, who Meher Baba has described to me as one of the greatest spiritual personalities of his age. Yet he does not hesitate to admit that Meher himself is honest and really believes in his spiritual attainment, although this attainment remains unproven. I reach Pune, put up at a hotel in the cantonment, and then drive straight to the abode of Hazrat Babajan. The guide who knows her personally, and who will eke out my little Hindustani as an interpreter, accompanies me. We find her in a narrow street whose lighting is a quaint mixture of gaudy little oil lamps and electric globes. She lies, in full view of passers-by, upon a low divan. A fenced veranda rail separates her from the street. Above the wooden shelter rises the shapely outline of a neem tree, whose white blossoms make the air slightly fragrant. "You must take off your shoes," my guide warns me. "It is considered disrespectful to wear them when you enter." I obey him, and a minute later we stand by her bedside. She lies flat on her back, this ancient dame. Her head is propped by pillows. The lustrous whiteness of her silky hair offers a sad contrast to the heavily wrinkled face and seamed brow. Out of my slender store of newly learned Hindustani, I address a phrase of self-introduction to the old lady. She turns her aged head, stretches out a skinny, bony forearm, and then takes one of my hands in her own. She holds it tightly, staring up at me with unworldly eyes. Those eyes puzzle me. They seem to be quite uncomprehending, entirely vacant. She silently grips my hand for 3 or 4 minutes and continues to look blankly into my own eyes. I receive the feeling that her gaze penetrates me. It is a weird sensation. I do not know what to do. At last, she withdraws her hand and brushes her forehead several times. Then she turns to my guide and says something to him, but it is in the vernacular and I cannot grasp its meaning. He whispers the translation. He has been called to India and soon he will understand. A pause. Then she crooks forth another sentence, but its meaning were better kept in my memory than in print. Her voice is extremely feeble. Her words emerge slowly, with much difficulty. Is it possible that this aged and decrepit fleshly frame, this haggard and huddled figure, contains the soul of a genuine fakir with wondrous powers? Who can say? It is not always easy to read the pages of the soul by the letters of the body. But the woman is nearing her century. I have been warned that continued conversation with her is not permissible, owing to her enfeebled condition. I prepare to withdraw quietly, strongly impressed by one thought. I think that the vacancy of her eyes is a signal that she is near the gate of death. The mind is parting from the worn-out body, but drags itself back now and again to pay a feeble attention to this world through strange eyes. In the hotel, I sum up my feelings that some deep psychological attainment really resides in the depths of her being. I am certain. Respect rises unbidden within me. I find that the contact has diverted my normal thought currents and raised up an inexplicable sense of that element of mystery which surrounds our earthly lives, despite all the discoveries and speculations of the scientists. I see with unexpected clarity that these scientific writers, who profess to reveal the fundamental secrets of the great world puzzle, profess what is nothing more than surface scratching. But I cannot understand why a brief contact with the woman fakir should so sap at the very base of my confident mental certainties. The cryptic prophecy she made recurs to my mind. I am unable to grasp its meaning. No one has called me to India. Have I not gone freely of my own whim? Only now as I write these lines, long after the event, do I believe that I begin dimly to understand. 'Tis a strange world, my masters. Chapter 5. The Anchorite of the Adyar River. The hands race around my watch. The weeks move across the face of my calendar, while I work my way southwards across the Deccan Plateau. I visit several remarkable places, but find few remarkable men. Some inscrutable impelling force, which I cannot understand, but which I blindly obey, hurries my pace so that sometimes I rush onwards as though I am a tourist. At last, I am on the train to Madras, where I intend to halt and establish myself for a while. During the long night journey, when sleep is difficult to procure, I take count of the invisible gains which I have reaped during these travels in Western India. I force myself to confess that so far I have not tracked down any yogi about whose discovery I can feel unduly elated. As for the thought of finding a rishi, that now lies in the remote depths of my mind. On the other hand, I have seen enough of the gross superstitions and suffocating customs of sleepy India to make me realize that the skepticism and warnings of some chance Bombay acquaintances are well justified. I realize, too, that my self-imposed task will be difficult of fulfillment. Pious men are here in all their 57 varieties, but they do not provide sufficient attraction. One wanders by temples whose mysterious interior seems to promise much. I cross the sacred precincts and stand at the threshold. I peep inside and behold the fantastic worshippers who toll a bell as they pray, that their prayers may not escape the ears of their chosen deity. I am glad to reach Madras, whose straggling and colorful appearance appeals to me, and I settle in a charming suburb about 2 miles outside the city so as to get easier contact with the Indian rather than with the European element. My house is in the street of the Brahmins. The road is choked with a thick layer of sand, into which my shoes readily sank. The sidewalk is made of beaten earth. Everything is free from the improving touch of the 20th century. The whitewashed houses have pillared porches and open verandas. In the interior of mine, there is a tiled courtyard, around which runs a covered gallery. Our water is hauled up by a bucket from an old well. The luxuriant tropical scenery which unfolds as soon as one gets away from the 2 or 3 streets which compose this suburb affords me perpetual delight. Soon I discover that the Adyar River is less than half an hour's walk away. There are several shady palm groves near this wide stream, and they take my fancy. I spend my spare time loitering among them or walk for a few miles beside the languid water. The Adyar River flows down to Madras, of which city it forms the southern boundary, and then joins the ocean amid a ceaseless rise and fall of the Coromandel surf. Alongside this beautiful stream, I slowly amble one morning, accompanied by a Brahmin acquaintance who learns where my interests lie. After some time, he suddenly seizes my arm. "Look! Look!" he exclaims. "Do you see that young man who is approaching us? He is known to be a yogi. He would interest you, but alas, he never talks to us." "Why not?" "I know where he lives. He is the most reserved man in the whole district." By this time the stranger has almost reached us. He possesses an athletic figure, and I judge him to be about 35. He is slightly above medium height. What strikes me most, however, is the negroid character of his face. The skin is darkened to a shade of black, and the broad, flat nose, the thick lips, and muscular frame all betoken non-Aryan blood. His long, neatly plaited hair is gathered around the crown of his head in a sort of top-knot. He wears a peculiar kind of large earring. A white shawl is wrapped around his body and then flung across the left shoulder. The legs are bare and the feet uncovered. He completely ignores us and paces onwards with slow steps. His eyes are downcast, as though intent on searching the ground. One gathers the impression that the mind behind those eyes is pondering over some matter. What, I wonder, is the subject of this walking meditation? He piques and arouses my interest. Still further, an intense desire to break down the barriers which separate us grips me suddenly. I want to talk to him. "Let us turn back," I suggest. The Brahmin protests firmly. "It is useless." "Well, at least I can try," I answer. The Brahmin again endeavors to dissuade me. "That man is so inaccessible that we know hardly anything of him. He keeps himself quite aloof from his neighbors. We must not interfere with him." But I am already moving in the reputed yogi's direction, and my companion has perforce to follow me. We are soon behind the other man, who gives no sign of his awareness of our presence, but continues to pace slowly onward. We follow with parallel steps. "Please ask if I may converse with him," I tell my companion. The latter hesitates and then shakes his head. "No, I dare not," he declares weakly. The unpleasant possibility that I might be missing a valuable contact stirs me to further effort. There is no alternative but to address the yogi myself. I throw all conventions, Hindu and European, to the wind, stand directly in his path, and face him. I try a brief sentence out of my slight stock of Hindustani. He looks up. There is half a smile around his mouth, but he makes a negative gesture of the head. At this time I know only a single word of Tamil, which is the vernacular of Madras, and doubtless the yogi knows even less of English. Few people know Hindustani in the south, but of this fact I am not yet aware. Fortunately, the Brahmin begins to feel that he cannot leave me so helpless and advances to the rescue. In a hesitant, apologetic voice, he says something in Tamil. The yogi does not reply. His face hardens. The eyes become cold and unfriendly. The Brahmin looks at me embarrassed. A prolonged pause follows. Neither of us knows what to do. I realize ruefully what a difficult task it is to help hermits to find their tongues. They dislike being interviewed, and they do not wish to talk to strangers about their intimate experiences. They dislike especially being asked to break their chronic silence for the sake of a sun-helmeted white man who is tacitly assumed to possess neither sympathy with nor understanding of the subtleties of yoga. This feeling is succeeded by another. I become strangely aware of a penetrating inspection on the yogi's part. Somehow I sense that he is mentally probing my innermost thoughts, yet outwardly he remains aloof, indifferent. Am I mistaken? But I cannot shake off this weird feeling that I have become a kind of human, microscopical specimen. The Brahmin becomes very nervous and nudges me as a hint to be off. Another minute, and I shall yield to his silent importunity and go away defeated. The yogi makes a sudden gesture of his hand, leads us towards a tall palm tree close by, and silently bids us sit down at its foot. He then drops to the ground himself. He addresses some Tamil words to the Brahmin. I notice that his voice possesses a peculiar resonance, and a quality which is almost musical. The yogi says that he is willing to converse with you, my companion interprets, and then volunteers the statement that the other man has peregrinated an unfrequented part of the river for some years. The first thing I ask is the man's name, whereupon I hear such a lengthy string of appellations that I immediately christen him anew. It appears that his name is Vishudhananda, that he possesses 4 other names all equally long or longer, and that the only useful thing to do seems to be to call him Brahma. If I am to give all 5 of the names, the words would stretch right across this page, so many letters there are in each name. I am both awed and appalled at the length of the young man's patronymic. It is therefore better to maintain a discreet silence about them and make matters easier for unclimatized readers by referring to him henceforth as Brahma, the shorter name which I bestow on him in conversation. Please tell him that I am interested in yoga and wish to know something about it, I say. The yogi nods his head on hearing the translated statement. Yes, I can see that, he replies with a smile. Let the Sahib ask questions. What kind of yoga practice do you follow? Mine is the system of body control. It is the most difficult of all the yogas. Body and breath must be fought as though they were obstinate mules, and they must be conquered. Thereafter the nerves and mind are more easily controlled. What benefit do you get from it? Brahma gazes across the river. Health of the body, strength of the will, length of years, these are few benefits, he says. The yogi who has become a master in the training which I follow brings the flesh to iron-hard endurance. Pains do not move him. I know one who submitted to an operation at the hands of a surgeon when no sleep-giving drug could be used. He endured it without a murmur. Such a one can also experience in his unprotected body the most intense cold, yet receive no hurt. I whip out my notebook, for I perceive that our conversation is likely to prove more interesting than I anticipated. Brahma smiles again at my stenography, but does not object. Tell me more about your yoga system, I beg him. My master has lived on the open mountains of the Himalayas, surrounded by snow and ice and wearing a cinnamon-colored robe for his only comfort. He can sit down for several hours at a stretch in a place where it is so cold that water instantly freezes. Yet he will feel no distress. Such is the power of our yoga. You are a disciple, then? Yes, there are still many hills to climb. I have given 12 years of unstopping effort to practice our exercises every day. And you have attained some unusual powers? Brahma nods his head but maintains a stolid silence. I am intrigued more and more by this strange young man. Is it permissible to ask how you became a yogi? I query, somewhat uncertainly. At first there is no answer. We 3 continue to squat under the fronded palm. I hear the hoarse cries of errant crows among a group of coconut trees on the opposite bank of the river. Mingling with this noise comes the fitful chatter of a few monkeys who explore the treetops. From the shore rises the quiet plash of the water. Most willingly comes Brahma's sudden reply. I think he realizes that my questions are prompted by something deeper than mere academic curiosity. He hides his hand beneath his shawl, fixes his gaze upon some object on the other side of the river, and begins to speak. I was a quiet and lonely child. There was no pleasure for me in the usual habits of children. I did not care to play with the others, but liked to wander alone in gardens or in the fields. Few people understand a brooding boy, and I cannot say that I was happy with life. About the age of 12, I happened by mere chance to overhear the conversation of some older persons, and it was through their talk that I first discovered the existence of yoga. This event aroused in me a desire to learn more of the matter. I began to inquire into it among several people, and in this way was able to get a few books in Tamil, which revealed many interesting things about the yogis. As a horse riding through a desert thirsts for water, so did my mind thirst for still further knowledge about them. but I came to a point where it seemed impossible to get to know more. One day I reread, as if by chance, a sentence in one of my books. It was, "To succeed on the path of yoga, you must have a personal teacher." These words now made a tremendous impression on me. I felt that only by leaving home and traveling about could I find a suitable teacher. To this course my parents would not give permission. Not knowing what else to do, I began to practice in secret some breathing exercises about which I had collected some scraps of information. These practices did not help me. Instead, they injured me. I did not then realize that without the guidance of an expert teacher, it is not safe for anyone to do them. But my eagerness was such that I could not wait till I met a teacher. Within a few years, the effect of these breathing exercises showed itself. A small rupture made its appearance on the top of my head. It seemed that the skull was broken in its weakest spot. Anyway, blood streamed from the wound and my body became cold and numb. I thought I was dying. 2 hours later, a strange vision crossed my mind's eye. I seemed to see the figure of a venerable yogi who addressed me, saying, "You now see what a dangerous condition you have brought yourself into by these forbidden practices. Let this be a severe lesson to you." The vision disappeared, and peculiarly enough, from that moment my state grew better, and I completely recovered. But the scar remained still. Brahma bends his head so as to show the crown to our eyes. A tiny round scar is plainly visible on his pole. After this unfortunate experience, I gave up breathing exercises and waited for some years until home ties were looser. He goes on. When my opportunity for freedom came, I left home and went out in search of a teacher. I knew that the best way to test a teacher is to live with him for a few months. I found several teachers and divided my time between staying with them for a while and returning home disappointed. Some were the heads of monasteries, others were the chiefs of institutions of spiritual learning, but somehow none of them satisfied me. They gave me plenty of philosophy, but little from their own experience. Most of them could only repeat what the books said. They could offer no really practical guidance. I did not want book theories so much as practical experience of yoga. Thus I visited no less than 10 teachers, but they did not seem to be the real yoga masters. I did not despair, though. My youthful eagerness burnt more strongly, for rebuffs only increased my determination to succeed. I was now at the gate of manhood. I resolved to leave the home of my fathers forever, to renounce the worldly life, and to search till death for a true master. I then set out from home on my 11th wandering or pilgrimage. I moved about until I came to a large village in the district of Tanjore. I went down to the riverside for my morning bath, and afterwards walked along the bank. Soon I came to a small shrine built of red stone, or rather it was a miniature temple. I peered inside out of curiosity, and was surprised to see a number of men gathered in a circle around a man who was almost nude. In fact, he was wearing only a codpiece. The men were looking at him with expressions of the utmost respect. There was something venerable, dignified, and mysterious in the face of the central figure. I remained at the entrance, awed and fascinated. I soon gathered that the little meeting was receiving some kind of instruction, and I had a strong feeling that the man in the center was a real yogi, a genuine master and not merely a book-filled scholar. I cannot explain why I felt that. Suddenly the teacher turned his face towards the door, and our eyes met. I then obeyed my inner urge and walked into the temple. The teacher greeted me warmly, bade me sit down, and said, "6 months ago I was directed to take you as a pupil. Now you have come." I remembered with a pleasant shock that it was exactly 6 months since I left home to begin my 11th journey. However, it was thus that I met my master. Thereafter, I accompanied him wherever he traveled. Sometimes he would go into the towns, sometimes he would withdraw into secluded forests or lonely jungles. With his help, I began to make good progress upon the path of yoga, and I was satisfied at last. My teacher was a yogi of great experience, though the path he followed was that of body control. There are several systems of yoga. They are very different in their methods and exercises. And the system I was taught was the only one which begins with the body instead of the mind. I was also taught how to obtain breath control. On one occasion, I had to fast for 40 days to prepare myself to receive one of the yogic powers. You may imagine how surprised I was one day when my teacher sent for me and said, "The life of total withdrawal from the world is not yet for you. Go back to your people and live a normal life. You will marry and have one child. At the age of 39, certain signs will be given you, and after that you will find yourself free to retire from the world again. You will then go to the forest and practice solitary meditation until you reach the goal which every yogi seeks. I shall be waiting for you, and you can return to me." I obeyed his commands and returned to my native place. In due course, I married a faithful and devoted woman, who bore me one child exactly as my teacher had predicted. But not long afterward, my wife died. My parents were no longer living, so I left my native town and came here to stay in the house of an old widow who also comes from there and who knew me as a child. She looks after my domestic needs, and yet, because the years have made her discreet, she permits me to live the reserved existence which the rules of our school enjoin. Brahma ceases talking, and I am so impressed by his narrative that my questioning tongue is likewise stilled. There are 2 or 3 minutes of complete silence, and then the yogi rises, turns his face homewards, and begins to walk slowly. The Brahmin and myself follow him. Our path leads through lovely palm groves and through pretty clumps of calcarina. The river shines in the bright sunlight, and an hour or so is passed pleasantly as we stroll along its banks. Anon, we begin to enter the haunts of men. Fisher folk wade into the water to carry their work in the ancient way, for they fish neither from boats nor from the shore, but stand waist-high in the stream and hold their nets in baskets. The beauty of the scene is enhanced by the brightly plumed birds which flutter down to the river. The air is slightly scented with a gentle breeze, which blows pleasantly in our faces from the direction of the sea. We reach a road where I leave the river regretfully. A herd of squeaking pigs passes us. They are under the care of a gray-haired, low-caste woman who hits unfortunate stragglers with a bamboo stick. Brahma turns eventually to bid us farewell. I express the hope that I may be allowed to see him again. He assents, and then ventured to ask whether I may have the honor of a visit from him. To the great surprise of my Brahmin companion, the yogi readily agrees to call in the evening. With the fall of dusk, I await Brahma's arrival somewhat eagerly. Several questions tumble over each other in my mind. His brief autobiography has intrigued me, while his strange character has puzzled me. When the servant announces him, I descend the few steps which lead from the veranda and hold up my hands, with palms touching as a token of welcome. This symbolism of the common Hindu greeting, which I have soon learnt will appear quaint to the Western mind, for the gesture indicates my soul and yours are one. The Hindus delight to receive it from a European, which reveals the rarity of that event, though it is nothing more than the Indian substitute for shaking hands. I want to be accepted as one with friendly intent, and therefore I try to respect the Indian customs and conventions so far as I am aware of them. This does not mean that I am going to turn native. I have no such purpose, but that I believe in treating others as I would have them treat me. Brahma accompanies me into the large room, and immediately squats cross-legged on the floor. "Will you not sit on the divan?" I ask him through the interpreter. It is well cushioned and extremely comfortable, but no, he prefers the hard floor, and Indian floors are laid with tiles, not boards. I express my gratitude for his visit and offer him some food, which he accepts and eats in silence. After the meal, I feel that I must tell him something about myself, something that will explain my sudden intrusion into his existence. And so I enter into a brief account of the forces which drew me to India. At its close, Brahma emerges from the bulwark of aloofness behind which he has so far hidden, and puts his hand on my shoulder in a friendly way. That such men should exist in the West, it is pleasant to hear. You have not wasted your journey, for you shall learn much. It is a happy day for me that destiny brought our feet to the same spot. Whatever you wish to know, ask, and so far as my oaths permit me, I shall gladly tell you." This sounds like good luck indeed. I asked him about the nature of his yoga system, its history and its aims. "Who dares say how old the system of body control which I have studied? Our secret texts declare that it was revealed by the god Shiva to the sage Giranda. From his lips it was learnt by the sage Martayanda, who then taught it to others. And thus it came down into a continuous line through thousands of years. But how many thousands we neither know nor care, though we believe that it is the last of the yoga sciences that were born in antiquity. Such was the decline of man, even in those days, that the gods had to give him a way of spiritual salvation which led purely through the body. The yoga of body control is little understood, except by the adepts who have mastered it, and the common people possess the most false notions of our ancient science. And since such adepts are, alas, so infrequently to be found today, the most foolish and distorted practices pass as our system without hindrance among the multitude. Go to Benares and you will see a man who sits all day and sleeps all night on a bed of sharp spikes. And in another place you will see a man who holds one arm aloft in the air until it is half withered from disuse and until the nails are several inches long. You will be told that there are men who practice our system of yoga, but it is not so. Such men bring shame on it, rather. Our aim is not to torture the body in foolish ways for the sake of public wonder. These self-torturing ascetics are ignorant men who have picked up by hearsay or some friendly person a few exercises in the forced contortion of the body. But since they know not what are our objects, they distort these practices and prolong them unnaturally. Yet the common people venerate such fools and bestow food and money upon them. But are they to blame? If the real yogis make themselves so scarce and keep their methods so secret, then misunderstandings will surely arise, I object. Brahma draws up his shoulders and a scornful expression passes across his mouth. Does a Raja keep his jewels on the highway for public display? He asked. No, he hides them in the treasure chambers deep down in the vaults of his palace. The knowledge of our science is one of the greatest treasures a man can have. Is he to offer it in the bazaar for all and sundry? Whoever desires to grasp this treasure, let him search for it. That is the only way, but it is the right way. Our text enjoins secrecy again and again, while our masters will reveal the important teachings only to tested disciples who have been faithful to them for some years at least. Ours is the most secret of all the yogas. It is full of grave dangers not only to the disciple himself, but to others. Think you that I am allowed to reveal any but its most elementary doctrines to you, or even those without extreme discretion? I see. But there is a branch of our science about which I may talk to you more freely. It is that wherein we strengthen the will and improve the body of beginners, for only so can they be fit to attempt the difficult practices of real yoga. Ah, that would interest the West. We have nearly a score of body exercises which strengthen the different parts and organs and remove or prevent certain diseases. Some of them are postures which press upon special nerve centers. These in turn affect certain organs which are not working properly and help to put them right. Do you use medicines? Certain herbs, plucked under a waxing moon, are used if necessary. We have 4 kinds of exercises or methods to accomplish this early work of putting the body's health in good order. First, we learn the art of repose so that the nerves may be soothed. For that, there are 4 suitable exercises. Then we learn the stretches, which are exercises copied from the natural stretching of healthy animals. Third, we clean the body thoroughly by a variety of methods which may seem very curious to you, but which are indeed excellent in their effect. Lastly, we study the art of breathing and its control. I express a desire to receive a demonstration of some exercises. There is no dark secret in those which I shall show you now. Brahma smiles. Let us begin with the art of repose. We can learn something of this matter from the cat. Our master places a cat in the circle of his pupils and gets them to notice how graceful the animal becomes when in repose. He instructs them to observe it carefully when the midday heat sends it to sleep. He tells them to watch it closely when it crouches in front of a mouse hole. He makes it clear to them that the cat sets a perfect example of true rest, and that it knows how to store and keep every bit of strength. You imagine that you know how to rest, but really you do not. You sit in that chair for a while, then move from side to side, then fidget, and then sprawl out your legs, though you do not rise from the chair and outwardly seem to be at ease. One thought after another races through your brain. Can you call that repose? Is that not a way of still being active? That is a point of view which has never occurred to me, I say. Animals know how to rest themselves, but not many men have this knowledge. This is because animals are guided by instinct, which is the voice of nature, while men are guided by their thoughts. And since men largely lack control of their brains, their nerves and bodies are affected as a result. There is little real repose for them. What must we do then? The first thing you must learn is nothing more than the Oriental form of sitting. Chairs may indeed be useful in the cold rooms of your northern countries, but you must learn to do without them during the times of exercise which shall prepare you for yoga. Our way of sitting is really most restful. After working or walking, it gives peace to the entire body. The easiest way for you to learn it is to place a small rug or mat before the wall of your room. Sit upon this as comfortably as you can and use the wall to support your back. Or you can place the mat in the center of the room and then use a couch or chair to lean against. After that, bend the legs inwards at the knees and cross the feet. There need be no feeling of strain, and you must not tighten the muscles. So your first exercise will be to sit like that and keep your body quite still except for the effort of gentle breathing. And having got into that position, you must promise yourself that you will withdraw your thoughts from all worldly burdens and affairs. Just rest your mind on a beautiful object, a picture or a flower. I leave my easy chair and drop on the floor, facing Brahma, assuming the attitude he has just described. It is the position of an old-time tailor sitting cross-legged at his work. Yes, you do it easily, observes Brahma, but other Europeans may not find it comfortable because they are not accustomed to it. You have one fault: keep your backbone straight, not bent. Let me show you another of our exercises. Brahma proceeds to raise his knees toward the chin, though still keeping his feet crossed. This position draws his feet away somewhat from the trunk. He clasps his hands around the front of his knees. This position is very restful after you have been standing on your legs for a long time. Be careful to throw most of the body's weight upon the seat. You may practice this for a few minutes, whenever you feel very tired. It will soothe important nerve centers. It is extremely simple anyway. We need nothing complicated to learn the art of repose. In fact, our easiest exercise gives excellent results. Lie flat on your back, legs stretched out side by side. Turn the toes outward. Let your hands be extended and rest them alongside the body. Relax every muscle. Close the eyes. Give your whole weight to the floor. You cannot do this exercise properly in a bed. It is important to keep the backbone perfectly flat. Use a rug laid upon the floor. In this attitude, nature's healing forces will rest you. We call this the corpse position. By practice, you may learn to rest in any of these attitudes for an hour if you wish. They take away tension of muscle and soothe nerves. Repose of muscle comes before repose of mind. Really, your exercises seem to consist of nothing more than sitting still in some way or other. Is that nothing? You Westerners thirst to be active, but is repose to be despised? Do calm nerves possess no meaning? Repose is the beginning of all yoga, but it is not our need alone. It is also the need of your world." Brahma's words are not without justification. "Those exercises are enough for this evening," he adds. "I must go." I thank him for what he has told me and beg for further instruction. "Tomorrow morning you may find me along the river," he replies. Gathering his white shawl around his shoulders, he touches his palms in farewell and is gone. I am left to ruminate about the interesting conversation which has so abruptly ended. I meet the yogi again on many occasions. At his desire, I intercept him on his morning walks, but when I can cajole him indoors, he spends his evenings with me. Those evenings prove extremely fruitful for me and my quest, because he unfolds a more arcane knowledge when the moon displays herself than he is willing to unfold under a high sun. A little inquiry enables me to solve a point which has puzzled me for a while. I have been under the impression that the Hindus are a brown race. Why then is Brahma's skin dark to the point of negroid blackness? The answer is that he belongs to an indigenous population which appears to be India's first inhabitant. When the Aryans, India's earliest invaders, broke through the mountains in the northwest thousands of years ago and descended into the plains, they found this native race of Dravidians and drove them into the south. These Dravidians remain a separate people to this day, except that they have absorbed the religion of their conquerors. The fiery tropic sun has pigmented their skin almost black, which, together with other evidences, makes certain ethnologists think that they primarily arose out of some African stock. As in those early days of their undisputed sway over the entire country, the Dravidians still wear their hair long and tied in a knot behind their heads, and they still speak in their primal, half-chanted tongues, of which the most important is Tamil. Brahma makes the confident assertion that the brown invaders took their knowledge of yoga from his own race, just as they took certain other things in addition. But scholarly Hindus to whom I mention this claim deny it is absurd. I therefore leave the less important question of origin to settle itself. Because I am not writing a thesis around the subject of yogic physical culture, I do not purpose to describe more than 2 or 3 exercises in the art of adopting and maintaining fixed bodily attitudes, which appears to be so prominent a feature of the yoga of body control. The 20 or more postural methods which Brahma demonstrates, either in a palm-fringed grove or in my more prosaic quarters, involve strangely contorted attitudes, and to Western eyes at least must appear either ludicrous or impossible or both. Some of them require balancing on both knees and feet upturned, or balancing the entire weight of the body upon the tips of one's fingers. Others take the arms behind the back and somehow bring the hands to the front again on opposite sides. Others again tie up all the limbs in a complicated knot. Still others put the legs round the neck or over the shoulders in acrobatic manner, while a 5th group twist and turn the trunk in the queerest imaginable style. It is while watching Brahma perform some of these feats that I begin to perceive how difficult will this art of yoga be. How many of these exercises comprise your system? I inquire. There are 84 postures in the yoga of body control, replies Brahma, though I do not know more than 64 at present. Even as he speaks, he practices one of these postures and sits in it as comfortably as I sit in a chair. Indeed, he tells me that this is his favorite posture. It is not a difficult one, this, but it does seem uncomfortable. His left foot is tucked into the groin, and the heel of the other foot is placed under the base of the body, the right leg being doubled back so as to carry most of the weight. What is the use of such a posture? I ask again. If a yogi enters into it and then practices a certain breathing exercise, he will become more youthful. And that breathing exercise? I am not permitted to reveal it to you. What is the object of all these postures, then? The mere fact of sitting or standing for regular periods in certain fixed postures may seem of small importance in your eyes, but the concentration of attention and willpower upon the chosen posture is so intense, if success is to be gained, that sleeping forces awaken within the yogi. These forces belong to the secret realms of nature. Therefore, they are seldom fully aroused until our breathing exercises are also practiced, for the breath possesses deep powers. Though the awakening of such forces is our real aim, no less than a score of our exercises are capable of being used for benefiting one's health or to remove certain diseases, while others will drive impurities out of the body. Is this not of great use? Still other postures are intended to assist our efforts to get control over the mind and soul, for it is a truth that the body influences thought no less than thought influences the body. In the advanced stages of yoga, when we may be plunged for hours in meditation, the proper posture of the body not only enables the mind to remain undistracted in its efforts, but actually assists its purpose. Add to all these things the tremendous gain in willpower which comes to the man who perseveres in these difficult exercises, and you may see what virtues there are in our methods. But why all this twisting and turning? I object. Because there are many nerve centers scattered throughout the body, and each posture affects a different center. Through the nerves we can influence either the organs of the body or the thoughts in the brain. Those twists enable us to reach nerve centers, which otherwise might remain untouched. I see. The basis of this yogic physical culture begins to shape itself a little more clearly in my mind. It is interesting to ascertain how it compares with the basic principles of our European and American systems. I tell Brahma about the existence of the latter. I do not know your Western systems, but I have seen white soldiers being drilled at the great camp near Madras. By watching them, I have understood what their instructors wish to do. Strengthening the muscles seems to have been their first object, because you Westerners find your highest virtues in being bodily active. Therefore, you make much use of the limbs in a most energetic manner, repeating those movements again and again. You spend energy vigorously, so that you may build up the muscles and receive greater strength in return. That is a good thing to do in the cold countries of the north, doubtless. What is the chief difference between the methods as you see it? Our yoga exercises are really poses and require no further movements after the pose has been taken up. Instead of seeking more energy with which to be active, we seek to increase the power of endurance. You see, we believe that though the development of the muscles may be useful, it is the power which is behind them that is of greater value. Thus, if I tell you that standing on your shoulders in a particular way will wash the brain with blood, soothe the nerves, and remove certain weaknesses, you as a Westerner would probably do the exercise for a moment and repeat it several times with a rush. You may strengthen the muscles which are called into action by this exercise, but you would get little of the benefits which a yogi gets by doing it in his own way. But what may that be? He will do it slowly, with deliberation, and then maintain the position as steadily as he can for some minutes. Let me show you this all-body posture, as we call it. Brahma lies flat on his back, hands at his sides and legs together. He raises his legs into the air, keeping the knees quite straight until they have attained about 2/3 of the right angle with the floor. He supports his back with his hands, resting the elbows on the floor. The body is then tilted completely upward, his trunk and hips becoming vertical. The chest is brought forward to touch the chin. The hands form a bracket which supports the trunk. The weight of the body is supported by the shoulders and the back of the neck and head. After maintaining this upside-down position for about 5 minutes, the yogi gets up and explains its value. This posture brings blood flowing down to the brain by its own weight for a few minutes. In the ordinary position, the blood has to be forced upwards by the pumping action of the heart. The difference between the two ways is shown by the soothing effect of the posture upon the brain and nerves. For men who work with their minds, thinkers, and students, the quiet practice of this all-body posture brings quick relief when their brains are tired. This is not its only virtue. It strengthens the sex organs. But these benefits come only if the exercise is done in our way and not in your hasty Western manner. If I am not mistaken, you mean that the yoga attitudes keep the body fixed in a state of poised stillness, whereas our Western exercises violently agitated? Even so, agrees Brahma. A further exercise which I select from Brahma's repertory as being more within the compass of Western limbs is one which should quickly yield to patience in practice. In this posture, the yogi sits with extended legs, raises both arms over his head, and crooks the first fingers. He bends his trunk forward, exhaling the breath while doing so, and grasps the big toes of his feet inside the hooked fingers. The right toe is caught by the right index finger, and so on. Then he slowly bends his head forward until it falls between his outstretched arms and the forehead lies flat against his thighs. He keeps this curious position for a little while and then gradually returns to a normal attitude. Do not try to do this all at once, he warns me. Try to bring the head a little closer to the knees, little by little only. Even if it takes a few weeks to succeed in this posture, once you have mastered it, it will be yours for years. I learned that this exercise strengthens the spine as indeed one might expect it to do, that it removes nervous troubles caused through spinal weaknesses, and that it will work wonders with the blood circulation. The next posture, Brahma sits on the floor and then doubles his legs up underneath him. Thus, the soles of his feet come under the base of his body. He drops the trunk backward until his shoulders touch the floor. He crosses his arms underneath the back of the head, which is then cushioned upon them. Each hand now grasps the opposite shoulder joint. He remains in this not unshapely pose for some minutes. On emerging from it, he explains that nerve centers situated in the neck and shoulders, as well as in the legs, are favorably affected by the exercise, and that even the chest is benefited. The average Englishman is so apt to regard the average Indian as a weakling, as an enervated product of tropic sun and underfeeding, that it surprises one to learn that such a carefully thought-out native system of physical culture has existed in India since antiquity. If our Western systems possess such a usefulness that no one would dream of disputing their value at this day, this is not to say that they are consequently complete, and that they have pronounced the last word on bodily development, health preservation, and the eradication of disease. Perhaps, if the West, with its thorough methods of scientifically directed research, would pick some dust-covered practices out of the traditional teaching of yoga, we might arrive at a completer knowledge of our bodies and a fuller regime for the healthy life. Yet I know that perhaps not more than a round dozen of the yoga postures are easy enough to be worth our time and trouble. The 70-odd postures which compose the remainder of the system are hardly likely to yield to any except the most enthusiastic, and that only if you are young enough to have flexible limbs and supple bodies. Brahma himself admits, I have practiced hard each day for 12 years. Only in this way could I master the 64 postures which I know. And then I was fortunate enough to begin while young, for a man of mature years could not even attempt these postures without feeling much pain. Bone, muscle, and flesh settle down into stiffened positions in a grown man, and can be disturbed only with difficulty and with pain. Yet even then it is remarkable how the postures can be conquered by continued efforts. I do not doubt Brahma's assertion that anyone may master these exercises by persistent practice. Only the slow breaking in of the limbs, joints, and muscles to the novel positions into which they are introduced must necessarily be such a dilatory process as to embrace the years. He has the advantage of beginning these postures when hardly out of his teens, and the value of this early beginning cannot be overestimated. Just as successful acrobats are usually those who have been trained in childhood, so it is obvious that successful yogis of the school of body control must start their training before the growing period ends, say before 25. I certainly do not know how it is possible for any adult European to adventure with the scores of intricate postures which comprise most of their system without breaking a bone or two in the undertaking. When I argue this with Brahma, he grants only a partial agreement, and stubbornly maintains that continued efforts may succeed in many cases, though not in all. But he agrees that Europeans may have a harder task. We Orientals have the advantage of having learnt to sit with folded legs from childhood. Can a European bend his legs and sit steadily for 2 hours without pain? Yet the crossing of the legs with intertwined ankles forms but the beginning of several of our postures. We look upon it as one of the best. Shall I show it? Thereupon Brahma assumes that position which has been made familiar to the Western world by the numerous pictures and images of the Buddha. Sitting perfectly erect, he folds the right leg so as to tuck the foot into the left groin. Then he folds the other leg and brings his left foot across to the right thigh, where its heel touches the lower corner of the abdomen. The soles of his feet are turned up. It is an artistic and balanced pose. The thought occurs to me that such an attractive posture may be worth trying. I try to imitate him, and am rewarded for my labors with excruciating pain in the ankles. I complain that I cannot achieve this position even for a single moment. How picturesquely exotic has this Buddha seat seemed to me in the past, when I have seen it exemplified in some attractive bronze figure which is placed in the window of a curio shop. But how unnatural does this twisting of the lower limbs now seem to me in India, when I attempt to exemplify it in my own person. Brahma's smiling encouragement fails to reassure me. I tell him that I must postpone my efforts. Your joints are stiff, he observes. Rub a little oil into the ankles and knees before you practice it again. You are so accustomed to sitting in chairs that the posture will put some strain on your limbs. A little practice every day will slowly remove the difficulty. I doubt whether I could ever do it. Say not that it is impossible. It will take you a long time, but you shall surely master it. Success will take you by surprise one day. It comes suddenly. It is so painful that it feels like a new torture, but the pain will lessen, and though it may take a much longer time than it will to reach success, you will reach a point where the posture brings no pain with it. But is it worthwhile for me to attempt it? Assuredly, the lotus posture, for that is what we name it, is so important that none of our novices are permitted to miss it, however much he is allowed to avoid other postures. It is the chief attitude in which advanced yogis perform their meditations. One reason is that it gives a solid base to the body, which is unlikely to topple over should the yogi pass into a deep trance, an event which sometimes occurs unexpectedly, though the adepts can pass into trance at will. You see, the lotus posture locks the feet together and holds the body quiet and steady. A restless and irritated body will disturb the mind, but in the lotus posture one feels poised and self-controlled. In this attitude it becomes easier to win the power of mind concentration, which is so greatly prized among us. Lastly, we practice our breathing exercises mostly when sitting in this posture, for the combination arouses the spirit fire which sleeps in the body. When this unseeable fire awakens, all the blood in the body is redistributed afresh, while the nerve force is sent with great keenness to certain important points. With this explanation, I remain content and bring our talk of postures to a close. For Brahma has earlier thrown himself into a large number of fearful contortions and convulsive posturings for my edification, just to show me something of his mastery over flesh and bone. What Westerner has the patience to go through all these complicated exercises and master them? What Westerner has even the time to do so?